My name's Anthony. I'm 37, married, and a dad to a 7-year-old boy named Liam. I work in IT, which means I spend most of my days behind a screen fixing other people's urgent problems. But the real challenges in my life don't come from my job, they come from my family. More specifically, my mom and my older sister, Clara. If you ask them, they'd both tell you that family means everything. But I've learned that in their dictionary, family really just means them. Growing up, Clara was always the favorite. She was the golden example Mom loved to brag about. Clara got straight A's. Clara made the cheer squad. Clara got accepted into that great university. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who liked drawing and computers, two things my mom considered nice hobbies, but not real passions. My dad tried to even things out, but after he passed away 6 years ago, Mom's favoritism became more blatant than ever. Clara had two kids, Ava and Miles, and from that point on, they became Mom's entire world. Every holiday, every family event, every Sunday dinner revolved around them. Don't get me wrong, I don't resent my sister's kids. They're great kids. What gets under my skin is how my mom treats Liam like he's a distant cousin instead of her only grandson on my side. She forgets his birthday gifts, mixes up his age, and once even gave him one of Ava's old toys that still had Ava's name on it in permanent marker. The hurt on Liam's face that day stuck with me. I let it go because I didn't want to make a scene, but inside, I was fuming. So when Mom called one Sunday afternoon, saying she had amazing news, I didn't expect much. But her voice had that sing-song tone she used when she thought she was doing something generous, so I picked up. "Anthony," she started, "I just wanted to tell you. I've booked us a family trip. We're all going to Disneyland." I blinked. "Wait, seriously? That's actually really nice, Mom." I looked over at Liam, who was building a small Lego castle on the living room floor. The idea of taking him to Disneyland lit something up in my chest. He'd been obsessed with the idea ever since watching a YouTube video about it. I pictured his face when I'd tell him. Mom went on, "Yes, it's been too long since we've done something as a family. I figured we could all use a little getaway." "That sounds great," I said, genuinely smiling for once. "When's the trip?" "In August," she said. "Perfect timing before school starts." Clara helped me pick the dates. "Cool. Should I send you money for our tickets, or—" There was a small pause, just long enough for something to feel off. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said, her tone suddenly lighter, evasive. "We've got it covered." I hesitated. "What do you mean covered? You're paying for all of us." "Well," she trailed off, then laughed in that nervous way she did when she was trying to gloss over something. "We only had enough to cover Clara's family for now, but we thought maybe you and Liam could come later or drive down and meet us." The words didn't sink in at first. "Wait, what?" "It's just, airfare is expensive," she said quickly. "And since Clara's kids have never been, we thought we'd start with them this year. You understand, right? We can always plan something for you guys another time." I sat there in stunned silence, the phone pressed against my ear. "You said this trip was for everyone," I finally said, my voice quieter than I meant. "It is," she insisted. "It's a family trip." "Except my family," I said flatly. "Oh, Anthony, don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "You know how things are. It's not personal. We just, well, Clara and I already booked everything through the airline account, and they didn't have enough tickets left in the promotion deal. It's really no big deal." "No big deal." I stared at Liam, who was humming to himself as he stacked the last Lego brick on his castle. I could already imagine how he'd react when I told him we weren't going. He'd smile politely, maybe ask if Grandma didn't want him there. He'd ask why, and what could I even say? That Grandma ran out of tickets. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. My wife, Nora, came into the room a few minutes later, holding a basket of laundry. "You look like you just saw a ghost," she said. "It's my mom," I muttered. "She booked a family trip to Disneyland. But apparently, family doesn't include us." Nora frowned. "You're kidding." "Nope. Only Clara and her kids are going. Mom said they didn't have enough tickets." "Did she even invite you?" "Technically, yes," I said bitterly. "But she made it sound like we were supposed to be grateful for the idea of being thought about." Nora put down the basket. "That's cruel, Anthony. Especially to Liam." I nodded slowly. "I know." That night, after we put Liam to bed, I sat at my desk staring at the shared airline account we'd all used for years. My dad had set it up when we were younger, and the family had kept using it for trips and points. Mom and Clara still used it all the time, and I'd been the one managing the login since I worked in tech. The account was under my dad's name, which automatically transferred to me after his passing, though they probably never realized what that actually meant. Out of curiosity, I logged in. And there it was, for tickets to Disneyland, booked under Clara's name. 2 adults, 2 children, all fully refundable. I wasn't planning on doing anything. Not yet. I just stared at the bookings, my cursor hovering over the cancel flight option. I wasn't even angry at that moment, just tired. Tired of being treated like the family's backup option, the afterthought. Tired of my son being the one who noticed the things I tried to downplay. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, Liam walked into the kitchen in his pajamas. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy." He climbed onto a stool and looked at me with that serious little expression he gets when he's thinking hard. "Grandma said we're not going to Disneyland." My chest tightened. "Who told you that?" "Ava," he said softly. "She said they're going with Grandma and Aunt Clara. She said it's the whole family trip." I set down the spatula. "I'm sorry, Bud," I said. "Grandma didn't get tickets for us this time." He looked down at the counter. Did I do something wrong? That question shattered something inside me. I knelt beside him, taking his small hand. "Hey, you didn't do anything wrong. You're amazing, okay? Sometimes grown-ups just make bad decisions. That's all." He nodded, though he didn't look convinced. He just quietly ate his breakfast after that, swinging his feet under the stool, eyes downcast. That day, I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I thought of Liam's question, did I do something wrong? My stomach churned. That night, after Nora went to bed, I sat in front of my computer again, logged back into the shared airline account, and stared at those bookings. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't let this slide. Not this time. And that's when something inside me clicked, a calm, focused kind of anger I hadn't felt before. Because if Mom wanted to play favorites using my dad's legacy, she was about to learn what happens when the forgotten son finally stops being quiet. Over the next few weeks, I tried to push the whole Disneyland situation out of my mind. I told myself to just let it go, that confronting my mom or sister wouldn't change anything. But that resolve didn't last long. Every time I checked social media, Clara was posting about how excited they all were for the family trip. Pictures of matching t-shirts, Minnie Mouse ears for the kids, even a caption that said, "Can't wait for the best family vacation ever. So grateful to Mom for making this happen, best family vacation ever." Liam saw one of those posts when I accidentally left my phone unlocked. He didn't say anything, but I could see the way his shoulders slumped, the way his little fingers tapped the edge of the counter before he walked off quietly. It wasn't just about missing out on Disneyland. It was the realization that he wasn't part of what they called family. That kind of thing sticks with a kid. A few days later, Mom called again. I thought maybe she was calling to make things right. I was wrong. "Anthony," she said in that overly sweet tone that immediately put me on edge. "I just wanted to check. Are you still okay to drive Clara and the kids to the airport?" For a moment, I couldn't even process what she said. "What?" "Well, it just makes sense," she continued breezily. "You live closest to them, and since you're not going on the trip, it would be such a big help if you could take them. You know how hard it is for Clara to juggle all that luggage with the kids." I let out a dry laugh. "You want me to drive my sister's family to the airport for a trip I wasn't even invited to?" "Oh, don't make it sound like that," she said sharply, her tone switching from sweet to defensive. "You're part of the family, Anthony. We just didn't include us." I finished for her. She sighed. "You're being petty. I thought you were more mature than this." I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. "You thought wrong," I said, and hung up before she could say another word. That conversation stuck in my head the entire week. It wasn't even about the trip anymore. It was about the pattern. The way Mom and Clara always expected me to be the helper, the backup plan, the one who quietly handled logistics while they took all the credit. It was like I was permanently cast as the supporting character in their family narrative. That Friday, Nora's patience finally cracked. "You can't just keep letting them do this," she said, crossing her arms at the kitchen table. "It's not just unfair to you anymore. It's unfair to Liam. He sees how they treat you. He sees how they treat him." "I know," I said, rubbing my temples. "But if I push back, they'll just twist it like I'm the problem. You've seen how they are." "Then let them," she said firmly. "They already act like you're the problem when you stay quiet. You might as well earn the title." She wasn't wrong. A few days later, Mom invited us to Sunday dinner, something she hadn't done in weeks. Nora didn't want to go, but I did. I needed to see them, to really look at them, before I decided what to do next. When we arrived, the house looked the same as always, spotless, lavender-scented, and full of framed pictures of Clara and her kids. There was exactly one photo of me on the wall, a family shot from years ago where I was half-cropped out of the frame. Mom greeted us with her usual half-hearted hug. "Oh, you made it," she said, as if she'd been surprised I'd shown up at all. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." Clara was already there, sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. "Hey, little brother," she said without looking up. "You bring dessert?" I frowned. "No one told me to." "Oh, Mom said you'd probably bring something. I guess we'll just have to make do." She gave a mock sigh, her tone dripping with fake disappointment. Liam tugged on my sleeve, whispering, "Dad, can I go play with Ava and Miles?" "Sure," I said softly. He ran off, clutching a small action figure he'd brought along. Dinner was a tense blur of small talk and thinly veiled jabs. Mom went on and on about the trip plans, what rides they'd go on, what hotels they'd booked, even how she'd gotten matching lanyards for the kids. She didn't once acknowledge that Liam was sitting right there, silently picking at his mashed potatoes. At one point, she turned to Clara. "I just can't wait to see the kids' faces when we get there," she said, smiling warmly. "It's going to be magical." "I bet," Clara said, nudging her glass. "They've been counting down the days." I felt my stomach twist. I glanced at Liam, who was staring down at his plate, pretending not to listen. Nora gave me a look that said everything she didn't have to say out loud. After dinner, when the kids went to the living room, I finally spoke. "You know," I said quietly, "it's a little cruel to keep talking about the trip like that in front of Liam." Mom looked at me, genuinely surprised. "Cruel? Don't be ridiculous. He's fine. He'll get over it." "Get over being excluded?" I said. "He's 7, Mom. He doesn't understand why Grandma's taking his cousins somewhere he's not allowed to go." "Oh, Anthony," she said with a dismissive laugh, "you always overthink everything. You're too sensitive." Clara chimed in without looking up from her phone. "He's a kid. He'll forget about it the second he gets a new toy." The casualness in her tone made something in me snap. "You know what, Clara? He's not like your kids. He actually notices when people treat him differently." She rolled her eyes. "Here we go again." Mom's expression hardened. "Don't raise your voice at your sister." "I'm not raising my voice," I said evenly. "I'm just tired of pretending this is okay." "You're ruining dinner," Mom said coldly. "Can we not have one nice evening without you creating drama?" "Drama," I repeated, almost laughing. "You excluded my family from a vacation, made us sit through dinner hearing every little detail about it. And I'm the one creating drama?" Clara scoffed. "Maybe if you were more grateful once in a while, Mom wouldn't feel like she has to tiptoe around you." "Grateful," I repeated. "For what?" "Being ignored." That was when Mom stood up, her hands shaking. "That's enough. I will not tolerate this attitude in my house. If you're so unhappy, you can leave." For a second, I thought about apologizing. Old habits die hard. But then I looked at Liam again, sitting quietly on the rug, his little shoulders hunched as he played alone while his cousins laughed nearby. And something in me hardened. "Fine," I said, standing up. "We'll leave." Nora gathered our things without a word. Liam looked confused but followed. As we walked out the door, Mom called after me, her voice sharp with indignation. "You always have to make yourself the victim, Anthony. That's why no one enjoys being around you." I didn't respond. I just opened the car door for Liam, waited until he was buckled in, and started the engine. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of the turn signal clicking. When we got home, Nora turned to me. "You know they're not going to stop, right?" "I know," I said quietly. "But I think it's time I stopped pretending they will." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from dinner. Every time Mom dismissed me, every time Clara smirked like she'd won something. The next morning, I woke up early, made a cup of coffee, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop, logged into the shared airline account again, and stared at the flight reservations. My dad's name was still listed as the account holder. The bookings were all tied to the points he'd accumulated back when he traveled for work, points that technically now belonged to me. I hesitated, my cursor hovering over the cancel button again. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about fairness, about boundaries, about finally standing up for myself and for Liam. Still, I hesitated. My rational side told me to leave it, to be the bigger person. But then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. Clara, hey, can you do me a quick favor? I forgot to add our TSA pre-check numbers to the booking. Can you log in and fix it? You've got the login, right? No, please. No, thank you. Just another assumption that I'd handle things for her. I stared at the message for a long time. And that's when something inside me settled. Not anger this time. Just a quiet, steady certainty. They'd taken advantage of me for years. Used me. Dismissed me. Treated me like I didn't matter. And now, they'd crossed the one line they couldn't come back from. I typed a short reply. Sure thing. Then I opened the booking details, selected all 4 flights, and clicked cancel. A confirmation box popped up. Refund will be processed to the primary account within 24 hours. I hit confirm. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message, it was a barrage. Clara, what did you do? Mom, Anthony, why are the flights canceled? Clara, the airline says we got refunded. Fix this now. I didn't reply. Not yet. I just let the messages stack up while I poured myself another cup of coffee. Then, finally, I typed one line back to Clara. Just making sure the whole family trip is fair. For a few blissful minutes after I hit send, the house was quiet. I sat back in my chair, feeling that strange, heavy calm that comes after years of pent-up frustration finally spill over. I wasn't proud, exactly, but I wasn't sorry either. I'd done what needed to be done. I told myself it wasn't about revenge, it was about standing up for myself and my son. But deep down, I knew it was a bit of both. That calm didn't last long. My phone started lighting up with a fury I'd never seen before. Clara called first. I didn't answer. Then Mom. Then Clara again. Finally, a string of texts came in so fast, it almost froze my screen. Mom, what have you done, Anthony? You ruined everything. Clara, they refunded to your account. You need to send it back right now. Mom, you're acting like a child. This was supposed to be special for the kids. Clara, I had to tell them the trip was off. Do you have any idea how hard that was? Mom, you've embarrassed the family. Embarrassed the family. Of course. That was always her line when I stopped letting her control the narrative. Nora came into the room, still in her pajamas, holding a mug. I'm guessing the fireworks started? I nodded. Oh, they're livid. She leaned over, reading the texts, then gave a small, approving smile. Good. Maybe now they'll finally understand they can't treat you like an errand boy. I doubt it, I muttered. If anything, they'll just double down. I was right. By noon, Mom was at my front door. No text. No warning. Just bang, bang, bang. Nora glanced at me. You sure you want to open it? I sighed. Might as well. The second I opened the door, Mom pushed past me, her perfume filling the hallway like a cloud. She looked furious, hair disheveled, eyes wild in a way I hadn't seen since my teenage years. How dare you? She snapped, her voice already rising. You canceled the flights. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused? Good morning to you too, I said dryly. Don't get smart with me, she barked. You had no right. Actually, I said, keeping my voice calm, I did. Dad's account transferred to me when he passed. Legally, I'm the account holder. I've been paying the annual fees. Those points were mine. That's not the point, she shouted. You sabotaged your sister's trip out of spite. I canceled the tickets, I said evenly, because you made a family trip that excluded half the family. Her mouth tightened. Don't twist this into something it's not. We simply didn't have enough money for everyone. Then don't call it a family trip, I interrupted. Call it what it was, a trip for Clara's family. There's a difference. You always have to play the victim, she snapped, jabbing a finger at me. You could have offered to pay your own way if it mattered that much. I stared at her, disbelief spreading through me. You told me it was already booked. You said there were no tickets left. She hesitated, eyes flicking away for a moment before she recovered. Well, yes, but we could have made it work if you'd been more flexible. You always expect things handed to you. That line hit like a slap. Expected things handed to me. This, from the woman who'd handed everything to my sister her whole life. Mom, I said slowly. Do you even hear yourself? Don't you dare talk to me like that, she hissed. I raised you. I've done more for you than you'll ever appreciate. I could feel Nora's presence behind me. Quiet, steady, Watching. You raised me, sure, I said. But you also spent my entire life reminding me that I wasn't enough. And now you're doing it to my son. That finally made her flinch. Just a little. Liam, she said, her voice softening for a fraction of a second. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Anthony. I love him. Then why didn't you want him there? I asked. She folded her arms. Because he's sensitive. You know how he gets overwhelmed. Disneyland isn't for every child. I just stared at her. You mean it's not for my child? She sighed dramatically. You're twisting everything I say. I can't even talk to you when you're like this. Then don't, I said quietly. You can leave. Her eyes widened like I'd just struck her. What did you say to me? I said you can leave. I repeated, opening the door wider. I'm done arguing about this. You owe Liam an apology, not me. She didn't move. For a moment, I thought she might actually cry. But then her face hardened again. You've changed, she said coldly. Ever since Nora came into your life, you've become selfish. You think you're better than us. That stung, not because I believed it, but because it was such a classic move. Deflect, project, accuse. I don't think I'm better than you, I said. I just don't want to be treated like I'm less. Her lip trembled, and for the briefest moment, I thought she might apologize. But then she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard that one of the picture frames rattled. For a long while after she left, the house was quiet again. Liam was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos. Nora leaned against the wall, exhaling. Well, she said softly. That went about as well as expected. Yeah, I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. But it's not over. I can feel it. And I was right again. By evening, the group text started. Clara added me, Mom, and even a few of our extended relatives, an audience, because of course she needed one. Clara, everyone, just so you know, Anthony canceled our flights to Disneyland. The kids are devastated. Mom, he's been acting unstable lately. I think Nora's been influencing him. Aunt Marie. Wait, what? Why would he do that? Clara, out of jealousy. He always ruins things when he's not the center of attention. Mom, your father would be ashamed, Anthony. That one hit harder than I wanted it to. My dad and I had been close. He was quiet, kind, the opposite of my mom in every way. He used to say, Son, don't let their noise drown you out. You know your worth, even if they don't. He was the only person who ever defended me in that house. And now, they were using his memory as a weapon against me. I stared at the screen for a long minute before typing back. Me. Dad would be ashamed, yeah, but not of me. He'd be ashamed that you used his account to exclude his grandson. Then I muted the group and put my phone down. That night, Liam woke up around 10 p.m. and wandered into the living room, rubbing his eyes. Dad, yeah, buddy. He climbed onto the couch beside me. Ava called me, he said quietly. My stomach tightened. She did. Yeah. She said Grandma told her I was mean for canceling their trip. His voice cracked just a little. I didn't do anything, did I? I felt something in me go cold. No, buddy. You didn't. You did nothing wrong. He nodded, but his little face looked so defeated that I had to look away. I could deal with my mother's manipulations, my sister's tantrums, but dragging my son into it? That was a line I never thought even they would cross. The next morning, I found out how deep that betrayal went. Nora walked in while I was making coffee, holding her phone. You need to see this, she said, her voice shaking. She handed me her phone, and there it was, a Facebook post from my mother. Heartbroken today. Some people will never understand the meaning of family until they destroy it. All we wanted was a magical trip for the grandkids, but jealousy and bitterness ruined it. Please pray for us, and especially for the kids who are confused and hurt. The comments section was flooded with sympathy. Oh no, that's awful. Some people just can't stand to see others happy. Sending love to Clara and the kids. And then, the one that made my jaw tighten. Wait, was this about your son, Anthony? I remember you saying he's always been difficult. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until Nora reached over and took the phone back. This isn't just toxic, she said softly. This is malicious. She's painting me as the villain, I muttered, and she's using my dad's memory to do it. Nora hesitated. You need to respond, Anthony. You can't just let her rewrite what happened. I will, I said, but not yet. Because as furious as I was, something in me clicked at that moment. A realization that this had gone past simple family drama. This was war, and wars aren't won by shouting matches or angry texts. They're won by strategy. For now, I kept quiet. I let them talk, gossip, spin their story. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them sure that I'd back down again, like I always did. Because the next move I was planning would change the balance of power in our family for good. And when I finally played that card, it wouldn't just be about the canceled flights anymore. It would be about exposing the truth behind years of manipulation and making sure my son never had to question whether he was wanted again. That moment, the betrayal, the lies, the way my mom turned the whole family against me, was the breaking point. The emotional turning point that made one thing crystal clear. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was taking everything back. After the Facebook post, life didn't immediately get better. In fact, the next few weeks were some of the loneliest I'd ever experienced. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach sank. The texts didn't stop, they intensified. Clara's messages were nonstop, alternating between guilt tripping me, pleading for the family trip to be reinstated, and outright insults. Mom's were worse, carefully phrased barbs about how I ruined the family, how I was letting bitterness control my life, and how she was praying for me because clearly I was so lost. Even some distant relatives, who normally had nothing to do with our family affairs, chimed in with passive-aggressive comments about fairness, responsibility, and how I needed to grow up. At first, I tried to respond. I tried to defend myself, to explain the truth. But every message I sent was twisted, dissected, and turned against me. I felt like I was screaming in a vacuum. Every reply made me more exhausted, more frustrated, and eventually, I realized the only thing I could do was step back. It was crushing. For the first time in years, I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being unreasonable? Sitting in the quiet of our living room at night, watching Liam sleep, I felt that heavy weight of hopelessness, the feeling of being completely alone in the world with your own family against you. And yet, even in that darkness, a small, stubborn spark refused to die. I couldn't let them win, not for me, but for Liam. I started small. I stopped engaging with their messages entirely. I muted their group chats, blocked notifications from Mom and Clara, and decided to focus on building my own space, literally and metaphorically. Instead of letting their chaos define my days, I began creating routines for myself and my family that were unshakable. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects with a focus I hadn't had in years. I was developing a new internal tool for our company that automated a process people had been complaining about for months. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and it was something I could control. I started waking up earlier, exercising with more discipline, and making meals for Liam that were both healthy and fun. Slowly, the chaos around me felt like it belonged to someone else, and my life began to feel like it was actually my own. Nora was a rock through all of this. She encouraged me to keep my distance, to stop trying to justify myself, and to channel my energy into something productive. "They're trying to make you react," she said one evening as we cooked dinner together. "If you react, you're giving them power. Don't. Build your life instead." It wasn't easy. There were nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, imagining every angry phone call, every cutting remark, every public humiliation. The sting of betrayal burned fresh every morning. But those nights also became my thinking time. Quiet, undisturbed thinking time where I could plan. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every slight, every pattern of manipulation, every way Mom and Clara had tried to control me over the years. It was methodical, clinical. I wasn't letting emotion run the show anymore. I was collecting facts. And then, slowly, opportunities started to appear. The IT tool I'd been developing at work caught the attention of my manager. Within a month, I was asked to lead a small team to implement the tool across other departments. It wasn't a huge promotion, but it gave me influence, and for the first time in years, I had authority that no one could undermine. No mom, no sister, no relatives with their opinions. With each success, the spark inside me grew. I started networking outside my department, quietly learning about management and operations, finding ways to make myself indispensable. I wasn't doing this for revenge yet, not overtly, but I was building the foundation. If life had taught me anything over the years, it was that patience was far more dangerous than impulsiveness. Wait long enough, learn enough, and when the right moment came, the impact would be undeniable. At home, Liam noticed the change too. He became more relaxed, more confident. He no longer questioned whether he was wanted or loved. I made sure of it. I scheduled weekly outings with him, little adventures that were just for us. We went hiking, visited local museums, and even tried a small indoor climbing gym. He was thriving, and watching him grow in confidence, knowing he was cherished and prioritized, became my personal fuel. Meanwhile, the family's attacks continued in muted forms. I could still see Facebook posts, passive-aggressive comments, and occasionally I'd catch wind of them talking about me in group messages where I wasn't included. But each time, it hurt less. I had learned to distance myself emotionally. They could try to manipulate and shame me, but it no longer had power over my life. Then, one day, I got an idea, a way to turn all of my quiet preparation into something with teeth. During a lunch break, I discovered that a family-owned travel agency Mom and Clara had been working with for years actually had some loopholes in their booking system, especially when it came to using accumulated points across multiple accounts. If I was careful, I could leverage those loopholes, not to harm Clara's kids, but to reclaim control of how family travel was handled from now on. It was subtle, meticulous work. I researched travel law, airline policies, and customer protections. I created spreadsheets, ran simulations, and even drafted emails as if I were a neutral party advocating for fairness. No one knew I was doing it. I didn't want anyone to suspect I was building something, because if they did, they'd sabotage it. All the while, my personal life improved dramatically. Nora and I strengthened our partnership, deepening our trust and communication. Liam was happier than he'd been in years. I had more confidence at work and began getting recognition for things I'd quietly accomplished, things Mom and Clara had always claimed they were capable of but never did. I wasn't just surviving, I was quietly thriving. By the end of that summer, a full 3 months after the canceled Disneyland debacle, I had transformed my situation completely. I had a growing professional reputation, a calm and happy home life, and a personal sense of power that was completely untouchable by them. I wasn't acting out in anger anymore. I was acting strategically. And the irony was that while they believed they had hurt me, they had only fueled my rise. But the real turning point, the moment when the rise would intersect with the betrayal and finally tip the scales in my favor, came unexpectedly. One Saturday afternoon, I received a message that seemed innocent at first, just another social media notification. But it wasn't. It was from Clara, and the tone made my skin crawl. "Clara, Anthony, Mom and I were thinking, maybe you should just leave things be. But if you really care about Liam, you'll let us make this right. We're planning another trip soon." I froze. Another trip. That's all she said. No apology, no acknowledgement, no accountability. Just another attempt to pull Liam into their control. And I realized then that patience alone wasn't enough. I had prepared, I had grown stronger, I had created opportunities, but if I didn't act with precision, they would never stop trying to manipulate our lives. I leaned back in my chair and smiled quietly to myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting out of hurt or anger. I wasn't trying to prove myself. I was planning, waiting, positioning myself. The next step wouldn't just reclaim what they tried to take. It would make sure they could never hurt Liam or me the way they had for decades. That night, I opened my notebook and started mapping out exactly how I was going to leverage everything I'd learned. Every slight, every manipulation, every instance of favoritism was now a data point. I began constructing a network of steps, small, unnoticeable moves that would eventually converge into a moment so precise, so undeniable, that they wouldn't be able to deny it or spin it. As I sat there, plotting quietly, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about the trips, or the favoritism, or even the humiliation. It was about control. About showing my family that the quiet, underestimated son, the one they dismissed, the one they thought would always follow their rules, could rise, claim authority, and reshape the dynamics entirely. And from that quiet place of determination, I knew something else too. They had pushed me to my rock bottom, shattered trust, and tried to humiliate me. But in doing so, they had unknowingly handed me the blueprint for my rise. By the time I finally closed my notebook and looked at Liam sleeping in the next room, I felt lighter than I had in years. The tension, the resentment, the betrayal, they were all still there. Yes, but now they were tools. Weapons. Levers. And I knew, with a quiet certainty, that the rise was only the beginning. The family might have thought they had won by excluding us, by shaming me, by manipulating everyone around us. But they had no idea what I was capable of when I stopped playing by their rules and started building on my own. If you'd asked me a year earlier what revenge looked like, I'd probably have muttered something petty, like hiding Clara's car keys or posting an embarrassing baby photo on her feed. But this wasn't about petty. I'd learned the hard way that the only thing that ever forced my family to change was proof they couldn't twist, and the only way to get that proof was to be meticulous, lawful, and unflinchingly calm. The whole thing had to look like structure, not spectacle. So that's what I built. I started by finishing the notebook I'd been keeping. Every little thing I could document. Dates, times, quotes from conversations, screenshots of texts, Facebook posts with timestamps, copies of receipts where mom had forgotten to reimburse me, the airline bookings, the points ledger in dad's name. I had everything from the Disneyland cancellation, but I also had the small, poisonous moments that showed a pattern. The times my mom had moved money for emergencies that always ended up covering Clara's extras, the gifts that altered between kids, the invitations that turned into one-family events. The pattern was boringly consistent, and when you lay boring, ugly consistency out in black and white, it reads like evidence. Next, I layered in what I'd quietly learned in the months since. The travel agency mom and Clara used wasn't some big faceless corporation. It was a small, family-run outfit that handled a lot of their trips. Their system had two things going for it: a vulnerability in how points were pulled across accounts, and an almost painfully friendly customer service rep who loved the drama of family travel more than was healthy. The rep, Cassie, was the kind of person who overshared on the phone and liked to help. I'd cultivated a relationship with her under a neutral guise. I noticed something odd in the booking workflow and wondered if it was a bug. She told me, with an over-earnest sincerity, how their system allowed points to be combined in ways that weren't always tightly audited. Sometimes points would be applied from accounts that technically didn't have express authorization. Sometimes agents would approve transfers because they assumed the elder account holder, Red, my dad, had wanted it. That was my opening. I didn't storm in demanding refunds and apologies. I did something smarter. I quietly requested a formal audit of the bookings tied to Dad's account, citing the account's recent activity and the unusual volume of point transfers. I posed as a concerned family member who wanted to make sure Dad's travel legacy was being used appropriately. Legally, I had the standing. The account belonged to me now. The agency, embarrassed at the idea of sloppy accounting, agreed to run a review and asked for documentation. I fed them everything: copies of Dad's old travel statements, the emails where Mom and Clara had discussed using the points, the dates. I asked for a written accounting of how the points had been applied in the last 2 years, and I asked that any bookings made with suspicious point allocations be flagged. Then I waited. Waiting felt different now. I wasn't suffering in silence. I was watching. When the audit came back 2 weeks later, it read like a ledger of favoritism. Several large point transfers to Clara's family were poorly documented. A number of bookings had been made with Dad's legacy points after his death, and in a few cases, the transfers didn't match any consent form. The agency quietly marked a couple of those bookings as irregular and put a temporary freeze on them while they investigated ownership. They emailed me a copy. I didn't post it. I didn't confront them in person. I saved the PDF and kept building the timeline. At work, the new project I developed became a quiet megaphone. Because I'd led the rollout and been good at building cross-department relationships, I now had a seat at a table where contracts and vendor relationships were sometimes discussed. One afternoon, over coffee with a manager in procurement, our conversation drifted to travel policies and vendor practices. I mentioned, casually and hypothetically, that small agencies sometimes had weak internal controls and that corporations needed to be careful when pooling benefits across accounts. That manager listened. The conversation turned into a meeting. The meeting turned into an introduction to a lawyer friend we occasionally used for vendor audits. I wasn't after legal action against my family. I was accumulating allies who could, when necessary, confirm the agency's own findings in an impartial way. All of this, my documentation, the agency audit, the quiet legal validation, gave me leverage. But leverage by itself is a dull thing without a plan for how to use it. So I built a simple, elegant pressure, a choice for Mom and Clara that would expose what they'd been doing either privately or publicly. I didn't want to embarrass the kids, I wanted to make it impossible for the adults to keep lying to everyone else. I drafted a letter. It started neutral, an explanation that, as the named account holder on Dad's travel profile, I'd authorized an audit to ensure points had been used in accordance with his wishes. It laid out the facts plainly: dates of transfers, specific bookings, and the agency's finding that several transfers lacked documentation. It concluded with an offer. We could resolve this quietly and internally by having Mom and Clara sign a short agreement acknowledging that Dad's points had been used and committing to a small restitution plan that would fund a genuinely shared family account for future trips, one administered transparently and fairly. Or, if they refused, I would share the audit with extended family, and the agency would be asked to reverse suspicious transfers and reassign points to the rightful account holder. I sent that letter, not as an angry email, but as a calm PDF attached to a polite message that I delivered to Mom and Clara simultaneously and to the agency and their legal counsel, who acknowledged receipt. I also CC'd a small roster of relatives who'd always been the quiet ones: a cousin who worked in finance, an aunt who'd been on hold when my dad used to call, a few people who had always felt like witnesses but had been afraid to speak up. The goal wasn't public shaming. It was to make sure the narrative couldn't be rewritten in private. The reaction was instantaneous and theatrical. Mom called, breathless and angry and playing innocent like an expert. "You can't do this," she said, voice pitched like someone reciting someone else's lines. Don't you dare make this a thing." Clara sent a text screaming that I'd betrayed them and that I was ruining the family. The agency, flustered, told me they'd freeze any disputed bookings pending resolution. A lawyer, whom I'd quietly hired as a safeguard, I wasn't naive. I knew they might try to claim anything, advised patience, and reminded me to stick to facts. I did. What happened next was the kind of slow, merciless unspooling I'd been preparing for. The agency, embarrassed to be involved in family drama, requested documentation from Mom about the transfers. Mom, who had always been loose with details when it came to money, found her memory suddenly selective. She gave vague explanations. "We thought it was okay. Your father wouldn't have minded. It was just for the kids." The agency pressed for signed authorizations. Clara produced some emails that looked legitimate at a glance, but my notebook had screenshots that contradicted them. The lawyer I'd consulted pointed out inconsistencies in the timestamps. Instead of confronting them publicly, I let the agency do its job. When it became clear that certain transfers could not be substantiated, the agency proposed a remedial action. Those points would be returned to Dad's account and placed under a new, jointly administered family fund. It would be accessible for trips only by mutual agreement, with a transparent ledger and joint sign-off required for any significant use. I'd suggested similar terms in my letter as the reasonable option. They accepted it. The agency's board thought it the best way to avoid litigation. When Mom and Clara realized the points were being taken out of their immediate control, their reaction was exactly what you'd expect from people who'd never had to consider losing privilege. They begged, negotiated, wept. Performative gestures meant to pull at anyone who might pressure the agency. They sent envelopes of flowers and promises of family togetherness to the quiet relatives CC'd on the email. They called the agency manager and demanded exceptions. The agency, which had been embarrassed by the publicity of a potential scandal involving Dad's legacy points, held firm. They wanted to be absolved of liability, and the cleanest absolution was a forced reconciliation, one that required transparency. There's a strange feeling when things you've been waiting for actually happen. It's not the cathartic release I'd imagined. It's quieter, colder. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when Cassie from the agency called to say the reallocation was processing. I wasn't celebrating. I was just relieved. The points were being returned to the account and held in escrow under the terms we'd proposed. Mom texted me that night, a frantic stream of messages with all caps please and half promises. Clara called me and left a voicemail, something about betrayal and ruining the children's dreams. I listened to it once, then deleted it. It served no purpose in my archive but to make me grateful I'd recorded everything earlier. But that wasn't the only thing I did. I also leveraged my new standing at work to secure something more tangible. I'd been offered a small leadership stipend and access to a corporate travel program because of the tool I'd created. Part of the program was a set of travel vouchers and a corporate rate with a major airline. The vouchers weren't generous enough to buy a Disneyland trip, but they were enough to cover a weekend getaway to a theme park-like resort nearby, and they came with perks: fast passes, front-of-line access, a private character meet and greet, the works. It wasn't Disneyland, but to a 7-year-old, it would glow. I booked it, Liam and Nora and me, 2 nights, everything paid, scheduled for a date weeks after the points were returned to Dad's account. I could have made a scene about it, posted photos to my public feed, live-streamed the trip, all the things my family accused me of wanting. But again, calmness. I told a select number of people: Nora, a couple of friends who'd been quietly supportive, and a cousin who I'd quietly included on the earlier email who I knew would show up as moral backup if things got ugly. I wanted the trip to be something safe and sacred, not bait. And then came the signature move, the family meeting. Once the agency had completed its procedural changes and the points were secured in the new, jointly administered fund, I drafted a concise message and sent it to the extended family list, the same group that had rallied around Mom's Facebook post. No vitriol, no theatrical proclamations. Just a timeline, the audit results, the agency's findings, the remedial action, and a clear statement that Dad's legacy would be protected and shared fairly going forward. I included copies of the audit and redacted screenshots that showed the pattern of favoritism. I finished by saying I was open to a mediated family meeting to discuss how to rebuild trust and use the fund for future family trips, if they wanted to remain part of that process. That email landed like a measured blow. The air in their corner of the world shifted. Mom called me, quieter than I'd ever heard her. Clara texted, but for once her messages didn't contain the blistering bravado I'd become used to. They were short, clipped, angry in a way that read like fear. A few relatives wrote privately, thanking me for bringing clarity. A few others wrote publicly, tentatively supportive. There were snipes. Why wait so long? You should have spoken up earlier. But those looked petty in the wake of the audit and the agency's confirmation. It wasn't just my word anymore. The records were objective, and they didn't care about attraction to drama or who'd been the most performative victim. For 3 days after the email, I didn't sleep much. I was waiting for the inevitable: screams, lawyers, lawsuits, some move that would drag everything into a courtroom. Instead, what I got was quieter and somehow worse for them. People started asking questions. Friends reached out to Mom, gentle and incredulous. A cousin who ran a small community group messaged her asking if there was anything they could do to help families in similar positions. My inbox filled with messages like, "I had no idea," and "I'm sorry," and "Thank you for doing this in Dad's name." Those notes mattered more than the glares from Clara's corner. The first major, visible payoff came at a family brunch someone else organized in the neighborhood, long after the initial storm of texts. Mom and Clara thought a show of togetherness might reset the narrative. They arranged a big send-off for the kids, the sort of photo op that would make nice content for Facebook. Everyone in matching shirts, smiling, a picnic spread. I was invited, because of course I was. Excluding me now would only look suspicious. I went because I wanted to look at them, to see their faces when the relatives who'd seen the audit walked around and maybe asked a question or two. As we arrived, I noticed the air was different. People who used to shrug and avoid conversation were more direct. "Hi, Anthony," said Aunt Marie in an almost conspiratorial whisper. "Thank you for sorting the travel thing. It's been confusing." The cousins I'd thought ambivalent hovered on the edges and actually made eye contact. They weren't hostile. They weren't awestruck either. They were, more than anything, relieved that the stink cloud had been cleared. Clara, sensing the undercurrent, tried to turn the brunch into a show. She gathered the kids for photos, pushed hair behind ears, posted a story with a caption about family first. But even as she posed, Mom's phone kept buzzing. She stepped away, looked at the screen with a face I'd only seen in private rages, and then sat back down, blank. For the first time since I could remember, she didn't know how to manage the optics. During the picnic, a neighbor, someone who'd seen half our family dynamics play out over years of block parties, came over and quietly said, "It's good to see a family handling things fairly." There was no shouting, no drama, just small, human acknowledgments that the balance had shifted. That evening, Clara texted me, "You think you won?" I saw the text, read it twice, and didn't respond immediately. The quiet was part of the point. I replied only once, and I kept it simple. I did what I had to so Dad's legacy is honored. That's all. I left it at that. But the thing about revenge done well is that it's not just about winning a point. It's about altering the rules. By forcing transparency on the points, by creating a structure that required joint oversight, I changed the dynamics of how family travel worked in a way they couldn't easily slip back into. More importantly, I'd shown other relatives that the narrative Mom had spun for years, of generosity that always tipped in favor of Clara, wasn't immune to scrutiny. The power balance had tilted. They reacted in other ways too. Mom stopped posting those idle, performative family updates for a while. Clara clung to a brittle anger that made her frostier in conversation, less likely to throw casual jabs. Some relatives reached out to make small peace offerings, calls that were tentative and, to my surprise, earnest. Others kept their distance. They didn't want to choose sides. And in the end, you can't make everyone like the person who exposes uncomfortable truths. There was a final, private moment that felt like the real payoff. A week after the brunch, an email landed in my inbox from a name I wouldn't have expected. My dad's old colleague, someone who'd known him well. It was short. Your father was a fair man. Thank you for making sure his things are used fairly. If you ever need a reference, let me know. I read it 3 times, and in that small, quiet way that builds someone back up, I felt the work of months translate into something deeper than victory. It was validation. And yet, even as the points were secured and the agency had its new rules, I could feel that this wasn't the last round. The family had been exposed, yes, but exposure does not always equal acceptance. There were still slights, still whispers, and the raw nerve of betrayal ran deep. Revenge had been served, calm, legal, effective, and had fundamentally changed one axis of our family life. But power, once rattled, tends to push back in unpredictable ways. That's where I stopped planning and waited to see the first counter. I wanted them to have the illusion of a chance to repair. I wanted them to choose reconciliation or further escalation. I wanted to watch which path they'd walk, because that would tell me everything about how long this fight would last. So I didn't gloat. I didn't crow. I rebuilt. I took Liam to the resort we'd booked, and I watched him run with joy that felt purer because it wasn't at someone else's expense. I made sure he knew he'd been wanted. I collected quiet victories, a friend's text saying my work's rollout was getting attention, Liam's teacher telling me how much he'd improved in confidence, Nora whispering one night that she was proud of me. But even as life improved, a part of me kept an ear tuned to the family static, because the story wasn't finished. Their next move, whether it would be contrition, a cunning attempt to regain control, or something uglier, would define the second act. I'd set the trap, and they'd either step into it by trying to spin the audit away, or they'd genuinely try to repair the damage in a way that meant something. When the first sign finally came, a text at 2 in the morning from an unknown number with a message that threatened to upend everything. I read it, closed my eyes, and felt a familiar cold climb up my spine. The victory had been real, but so was the danger that comes from poking a hornet's nest. I put my phone down and went to stand in the doorway of Liam's room, watching him sleep. For him, everything was simple and hopeful. For me, the game had only changed arenas. And the next move, when it came, would need more than evidence and paperwork. It would need precision, patience, and the willingness to do something the quiet me had never been comfortable with. Escalate in a way that would make them wish they'd never tried to make me the afterthought. The morning after the resort trip, I woke to a calm house. Liam was still asleep, curled up beside Nora on the couch after staying up late to watch fireworks with excitement that lit up his little face. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, ready to check emails before the day got busy. But the messages I saw weren't the usual complaints or frantic pleas from Mom and Clara. They were something else entirely. First, there was an email from the travel agency. Its tone was formal but unmistakably final. The audit was complete. All irregular point transfers had been corrected, with the misused points returned to Dad's legacy account. The agency noted that they had implemented stronger controls to prevent future misuse, including mandatory verification for transfers between family members. The letter was sent to Mom, Clara, and me. It was polite, concise, and, most importantly, non-negotiable. There was no way for Mom or Clara to manipulate it. Next, I opened the family email thread. Mom had sent a message addressed to all the relatives included in the audit correspondence. Her tone was defensive at first. Anthony has taken steps without consulting the family. This is upsetting and unnecessary. But as I scrolled down, I saw the truth emerge. The agency had included a summarized copy of the audit in its report, and it was impossible to spin. The numbers didn't lie, the dates didn't lie, and the documentation of point transfers didn't lie. Mom's email shifted mid-sentence from anger to pleading. I hope we can work this out for the kids' sake. Clara's response was even more revealing. She tried to regain control of the narrative by claiming that Dad would have wanted us to enjoy the points responsibly, but she had no documentation to back it up. Every statement she made contradicted the audit's findings. I could almost hear her frustration through the words. She realized that no amount of shouting, guilt-tripping, or social media drama could reverse the meticulous work I'd done. By mid-morning, a few relatives started replying to Mom and Clara privately, supporting the findings and offering to mediate a fair use of the points going forward. I didn't intervene. I watched quietly, letting them experience the consequences of their actions firsthand. It was mesmerizing, almost cinematic, watching the ones who had built themselves on entitlement and manipulation suddenly realize that structure, documentation, and patience could dismantle their world without raising a single voice in anger. Mom called later that day. I let it ring once and then answered. "Anthony, please," she said, voice tight. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said, calm as a winter morning. "What about the points? The audit? I don't know what to do. I can't fix it, can I?" Her words trembled slightly, which was a novelty in itself. Mom had always commanded every room she walked into. She had always assumed control by sheer force of will. Now, she sounded human, vulnerable, defeated. "Mom," I said slowly, "you can make amends. You can participate fairly in the new family fund, follow the rules, and make sure everyone's treated equally. Or you can continue fighting against something you can't change, and you'll continue to lose. The choice is yours." There was silence on the other end. Then a deep exhale. I understand. I suppose I have no choice." "You always have a choice," I replied. "You just need to choose wisely this time." She didn't respond further. I hung up, feeling a quiet sense of closure. Clara, predictably, called the next day. She tried to argue, to guilt-trip, to manipulate. But I had anticipated every tactic. Calm, methodical, factual. The points were inescapably accounted for. The agency confirmed everything, and my lawyer friend had offered a gentle reminder that any further attempts to interfere could be considered harassment. Clara sputtered through her first few arguments, then fell silent, realizing she had no leverage left. Eventually, she huffed and hung up. She wouldn't reach out again, not with threats, not with drama, not with her usual entitled bravado. The fallout extended beyond Mom and Clara. Several relatives who had once been neutral began treating me differently. There was a subtle shift in family gatherings, in block parties, even in casual text messages. Where I'd been dismissed or ignored before, I was now approached with respect and caution. People understood, perhaps unconsciously, that I had built something that couldn't be overturned by theatrics or manipulation. I had created a position of authority that was acknowledged silently, but universally understood. I had the power, and I had used it wisely. At work, my reputation continued to grow. The tool I had developed earned me recognition from senior management, and my calm, methodical approach to handling conflict, once an undervalued skill, was now praised. I had leverage, influence, and visibility. I was in control of my professional life, just as I had finally taken control of my personal life. The parallel wasn't lost on me. The lessons I'd learned at home, patience, preparation, documentation, strategic calm, had turned my life around entirely. But the most satisfying part, by far, was seeing the subtle psychological shift in Mom and Clara. Mom stopped trying to advise me on my life. She no longer threw casual, undermining remarks at family gatherings. Clara stopped broadcasting her little posts about family happiness that had been thinly veiled attacks. They were cautious now, aware that the infrastructure I'd built, quietly, relentlessly, would expose them if they tried anything. I didn't need to confront them again. The system I'd put in place did it for me. The final flourish came when Liam and I took our first victory outing after the whole ordeal. A small theme park, 2 nights, everything booked on my corporate vouchers. Liam didn't know the context. He just knew this was his adventure. Seeing his excitement, the pure joy on his face as he met characters, rode rides, and laughed freely, was more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation could ever have been. I realized then that revenge doesn't always have to humiliate. It can simply restore balance and protect what's yours. Later that evening, as we drove home with Liam exhausted in the back seat, Nora reached over and held my hand. "You did it," she said quietly, a mixture of pride and relief in her voice. "They can't touch him, or you again." I smiled, feeling the weight of months of planning, stress, and anticipation lift slightly. "We'll see," I said, because life always has surprises, but for the first time in years, I felt untouchable. Not because I'd crushed someone beneath me, but because I had built a world where my son's happiness and my integrity were safeguarded, no matter what they tried. The next day, I received one last text from Mom. Simple, concise. She knew she had been beaten, not by anger, but by logic, preparation, and the unassailable fact that she had crossed a line. "I suppose congratulations." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She understood. Clara understood. And for the first time, the entire house, Liam, Nora, and me, felt like our own sanctuary, free from the manipulation, favoritism, and toxicity that had once defined my family. I watched Liam sleep that night, the soft rhythm of his breathing a reminder of everything I'd fought for. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of closure that didn't require theatrics or vindictive displays. The work had been smart, calm, precise, and it had worked. They had learned the hard way that manipulation has limits, entitlement has consequences, and patience combined with strategy is more powerful than anger. And in that moment, looking at my son and knowing I had protected him, I realized the true final line. I hadn't just won. I had secured our future. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.